Welcome back to the Highway 49 podcast. We are back with episode 76 of the show. And after meeting up in studio this week, we're back on Zoom. So good to see y'all's faces. Hate it's not in person, but not missing too much. I can barely move right now. I don't know if for the YouTube crowd I'm in a sling. But guys, we're I guess when this runs, it'll be 10 days away from football season. So it's almost that time. Before we dive in, we got kind of a jam-packed episode. So before we dive in, let's hit the best thing we've seen this week. Jeremy, you go first.
All right, staying on the movie front again, went to see Alien Romulus on Sunday morning in Birkdale, went to the Regal Birkdale, went to a place called Bar Taco, great
Solid
margaritas,
spot
great Modelo's.
in there.
So good.
Been there. Yeah, we've been there before. Okay, awesome. And two margs, a Modelo. Great guy. He was talking to us about Alien, and then we just walked over, killed a huge popcorn, got a cherry icy, and saw one of the weirdest movies I've seen in a while. Um, just a bunch of aliens running after people. The Alien franchise is the exact same every time. It's aliens on an abandoned ship, and people are really dumb enough to go and check out an abandoned ship just floating in space. And what do you know? There are xenomorphs in there who want to kill you. End of the movie, though, one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. I won't spoil it for anybody, but go see that movie in IMAX. Great watch, but best thing I've seen this week is just watch aliens pop out of people's stomachs. Um, as crazy
Um,
as that sounds. You guys trust me on it. Good, good film, good franchise. That's what I got. Hannah, how about you?
also random question. What is y'all's movie snack order? Like, do you get
Ooh.
popcorn? What's your order? Mine's a popcorn and a Coke.
I'll go popcorn, but I have to have something sweet to offset the salty. So give me like some M&Ms and then like a cherry Coke. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I go get a cherry like icy, the slushy things. And then I stop at a gas station before because I gotta
Bingo.
get the
Bingo.
Yeah.
exactly. I gotta get the exotic Starburst, not the regular, pink.
Not the regular.
Not the regular. Got to go get the exotic. I don't want the regular, whatever. I want the strawberry, the watermelon, the cherry, yeah. So I walk in and then my friends are always surprised when I offer them like the most exotic Starburst. Like, how do you get your hands on this? Don't worry about it. Don't
Yeah.
worry about it. Let's just watch the movie.
It's
None of your
important.
business. Yeah.
Speaking of movies real
Uh,
fast, I watched Inside Out 2 last night.
oh,
Ooh, how was that?
The
good.
first one is better, but the
Okay.
second one is, I mean, it's
It's
for what it
going nuts
is.
at the box
That's what I'm
office, is
saying.
what I saw. Nuts.
So I liked it, but I don't understand how it's going so crazy because it wasn't like
Yeah.
it didn't move me like the first one did. The first one, you're like fighting off tears like multiple times in the movie. The second one, I think I just kind of knew what to expect, but
It's
the message of the
yeah.
movie is good.
It's like the Incredibles, and at this point, we're just gonna have to do a quick just rundown of this. It's like the Incredibles, where the Incredibles movie is great.
Yeah.
Incredibles 2 did better in the box office because people want to see the sequel. And also, it's like a three demographic movie where you have the kids who want to see it, but they can't go to theaters without their parents. And then you
Yeah.
also have the kids who were kids who are still kind of kids, but they're teenagers when the first one came out when they were like 8, and now they're 15, and now they want to see the sequel. So there's a lot of different groups that want to see those movies, and animations always hit the $1 billion mark.
Yeah. Sorry for that sidetrack.
No, I love it. This is
Oh, yeah.
I love this. Let's go.
I was just curious, but I think best thing I've seen, I mean, it's Tuesday today. I am in my era of rewatching shows. So now that football season is upon us, I've restarted Friday Night Lights. If you guys have never watched,
Nice.
it is one of my favorite TV shows. And just going back, I just love just looking at the characters in a different way. And I just fully relate to Coach's wife. Like she is me, like through and through. She's just hilarious. But just it's been fun, like watching it in a different place of life than I am like when I was like in
When
high school.
did you watch it before? Was it like a middle school thing? Because I remember going to middle school and people were like, "Did you see the new episode of whatever
Yeah.
Friday Night
It
Lights?"
was literally like eighth grade going into high school was when
Yeah,
I like my prime watching it. So I'm like revisiting it and I'm like, ah, what a great
still a
show.
banger. Still a
They
banger.
don't make it like this anymore.
Yeah.
But Hunter, you're injured.
Yeah.
Oh man.
What
See,
happened to you?
I'm gonna pivot to worst thing I've seen this week.
Yeah.
sticking on the Friday Night Lights front, I was telling my team, clear eyes, full hearts can't lose at this volleyball tournament, and
It all comes full circle.
we folded uncontrollably, and then left with some sort of rotator cuff injury. I'll know more next week, but yeah, sporting a sling, trying to figure out how to use a mouse with my left hand.
So sorry.
I guess it's not so bad. I'm left-handed, so this is my dominant hand that is still free. But as far as like, you're not using a mouse with your left hand, no matter who you
Yeah.
are. But yeah, we took an L last year. This time I was drinking Crown and Sprite, which I guess is my preferred drink from the volleyball trophy after we won. So that was fun. We'll go back on that. I feel like Giannis, like we didn't lose. We'll be back. It's okay. I just gotta like keep working.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll bounce back, man. Not too bad. But yeah. All right, let's get into it. I don't want to talk about the shit.
Said you win some, you lose
I was
some.
like,
Yeah,
damn,
dude.
can we liven up a little bit?
Yeah. All right, I'm good.
Jesus.
I'm good. All right. So media day takeaways. Charlotte football had media day. It was kind of a different setup with how they've done it in the past. They had Biff speak to the entire group in the team room like you would a Tuesday presser, and then they had two players, Max Brown, Prince Bemis, speak again to the full media group, and then it was kind of like break off sessions with individual players. So a little different setup, but I feel like it was still a good day as far as trying to get quotes, get the storyline set for the year. Hannah, it was good to see you there. I apologize. Like I said, I did not know what was about to happen with how they set it all up. So sorry we didn't get to talk more. But I'm curious as to your thoughts, takeaways from Biff, Max, Prince Bima, and any other players that you got to talk to.
Yeah, I will definitely agree with you about just a different demeanor. And I was actually really happy to see that. I know that last season was obviously not at all what Biff expected heading into his first year. And I appreciated his candor, speaking about that bluntly. And it was like we started out really optimistic, and I think he knows that. He, came into it like guns a-blazing. It didn't work that exact way, and now he's kind of gone back to laying the foundation. I think that's the biggest thing I took away was his talk about, building a house that can withstand anything. And that's exactly what Charlotte needs, especially moving forward in the next couple years, because it's not only going to get, you know, tougher with, the different things that happen with conferences and, more NIL money. It's going to keep growing. So I'm really happy to hear that. I feel like we're in a better place mentally heading forward into this season. I liked how he spoke about Max Brown. Because what I took away from last year is that we need a leader for quarterback. And like, I feel like
Definitely.
we've said this multiple times. And after, being in the studio with Chris and having him like point out things that he's done, like, taking responsibility, if, he threw an interception, anything, like you take responsibility, you take ownership. And that's exactly what Charlotte needs from a quarterback is a leader. Um, and we just didn't have that last year. So I was excited to hear that he's a servant leader. He's not a flashy guy, he's not loud. I mean, we've had some conversations with him and he seems it adds up, I feel like. And Prince, I think he's just got his head down. He's ready to get to work. He's returning this year, and I don't think they want to talk too much,
Yeah.
is what I gathered. I think they're wanting to let their play, do the talking, and I respect that. So I liked the demeanor, I liked the candor, I appreciated the honesty of the reality of the situation heading into this year.
Yeah, last year was a reality check. I mean, we talked about it off air just as friends and then on air on this show about all of this sounds good about winning all these games and making the college football playoff and all this stuff, but what is it going to sound like when you're 1-4? And we saw that unfold last year. And the ride that was Biff Poggi's first year, 2023 season, it seems a lot different now. And I talked to him just like outside of the media area afterwards, and he thanked me for asking that question of why is he so different this year. And it's interesting to see how you go from such the loud claims and whatnot to I asked him what to expect, what Niner Nation should expect for week one, and he pivoted straight to work with us. Like, we're trying to grow this thing, we're trying to build this thing. And I think you can look at that one of two ways. One, just not wanting to repeat last year. Like, you can't come out now and say that you're going to win again, right? You're just putting extended pressure on yourself to do something that's more than likely unreasonable unless you're playing NCAA 25. Now you go back, you look at this year, you've got the new quarterback, you brought your coordinators back, you've got big name coaches on the staff coming in, you've promoted some guys. NIL is taking a step up with this team. You don't want to say too much because you don't want to repeat of last year. So I like how they're approaching it. I think what they do in week one, and we're going to dive into JMU a little later, is going to tell you a lot about this team. As far as some of the interviews I got, or some of the players I got to talk to on media day, I think the two most interesting, I spoke with Omega Blake, and he started his career at South Carolina, transferred to ECU this summer, and then made a pit stop there, and then came to Charlotte. So I asked him about that. He said, I got some relationships built with some staff members at Charlotte, but that was the original plan. Come to Charlotte. But they were full at the time, so I had to make a pit stop until something freed up. So it sounded like his entire goal was get to Charlotte. I think it's interesting playing into the ECU Charlotte rivalry a little bit. I
So
definitely
he
think,
went to ECU for the summer.
or I guess the spring session he spent with the Pirates. And then he got to Charlotte literally August 1st. So
So like he
very
was basically in the queue, kind of waiting for a spot. I
basically,
got you.
it's
Really.
it's interesting how the portal works like that though, because you really can just bounce around. As I mean, we've seen a ton of players do that. But I asked him about his name because Jeremy, you mentioned the NIL. He said, my family are big Christians. They read the Holy Scripture a lot, and that's how my name came about. I'm the last child, and Omega is the last in the Greek alphabet. I get a lot of compliments, and I think it's a great name that sounds like it's supposed to be in the NFL. So he definitely has, I think his story, or his confidence is extremely high. I think his story is cool. That's definitely someone to watch for Charlotte coming in, because I think he won most improved player with the Gamecocks in the spring session going into this past season. Played his best game against Georgia of all teams. I think it was 5 catches for 86 yards. He definitely has some talent. Can he take that step and be a one or two receiver for Charlotte is going to be key. And then I really liked the last thing he said. I asked him about big games on the schedule this year, and he talked about coming from the SEC. He's playing big environments every week. He said, no matter who we're going against, it's nameless, faceless opponents. Whoever's lined up in front of us in a different color, we're smacking them in the mouth. I'm not gonna lie, like that makes me ready for football season. Just in general, just to hear someone say that. Uh, I think the offense, when you think of the receivers not really creating separation last year and then rarely being rewarded when they did, I really like what they brought into the room, and we keep talking about it. Who's going to be that guy? Who's going to be number one? And then one other person that I want to read some quotes from really fast is Mike Miller. You guys know on this podcast and the Observer, I've been very critical of Mike and the offense this past season, and the stats will tell you everything you need to know about that. So he addressed that. He said, as soon as we got here back to Charlotte off the plane from Tampa, concluding their last season, there was a mindset and a mentality that we're not going to go through this again. He said, I take full responsibility for what happened last year. We were one of the worst offenses in college football, and it's not even close. You can see all the stats. I don't look at them, but I'm very aware that they're awful. Third downs, explosive plays, and turnovers. That's how you win games. Guys are taking a lot of pride in that this year because they know if we handle what we can control, we can win a lot of games. I think it's interesting, kind of the flip, because last year all it was we're going to continue to commit to what makes us good. I don't know if y'all remember that. It's just over and over and over. Like, it'll work if we keep pushing. And now it's almost like we've accepted that that did not work, and we've changed position groups completely. And there's a totally different. Every position really is different, other than tight end, and we'll get to that later. But I thought media day was awesome as far as the quotes from the players, and I'm really looking forward to what's 10 days from now, guys.
Yeah, Omega Blake. Your name's not just cool. Go to your like whoever is managed by you or wherever and get some NIL money out of that, man. Come on. Do it, don't do it for yourself, do it for me because you have a really cool name. Second off, I gotta talk to the broadcaster, play by play for Charlotte. because I'm already thinking of like the coolest touchdown celebrations or just like celebrations for Omega, like the Alpha and Omega. Like you can just sit down in a room for 5 minutes and brainstorm the coolest calls for that guy. And then third, you talked about Biff and how his demeanor changed, and I think it kind of reminds me. Sorry, Hunter, I'm gonna touch a weak spot for you, the Eagles,
Ugh,
where you don't want your head coach you want your head coach to match the demeanor of your quarterback, right? So when you have someone like Jalen Hurts at the helm, who's behind center, when you think of the Eagles, the first person you think of is Jalen Hurts. He is the most like relaxed, easygoing dude, doesn't get fiery much, but the head coach is kind of starting wars that you guys can't finish. He's
writing
calling people
checks
out.
that
He's
the
writing checks
players
that you
got to
can't
cash.
cash.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think, like Hannah said earlier, Max Brown and his demeanor, he's not too flashy. He's not doing any of these things. Maybe Biff is also thinking, I can't have that demeanor with a quarterback like this. We have to be on the same, vibration. We have to be on the same wavelength. And because of that, I'm going to kind of, smooth my emotions out a little bit because that's what our quarterback is like.
Well, that's one interesting thing too, is while Mike took full credit for the offense, Biff also said he was in Mike's ear a lot last year, talking about which quarterback should play. Clearly, Jalen Jones was his guy. And you guys remember the spring game? He's a showstopper. He's this, he's that. And the reality was, he threw 2 touchdowns and 4 interceptions as a quarterback last season. That's not show stopping anything. So you get to the point of now, Trexler wasn't the answer. You're right. Max is that guy now, and they paid a pretty penny for him to be in green and gold. I'm really interested to see how it pans out, but I do think you're right about his demeanor matching the quarterbacks. One more thing I want to hit really fast before we get into some of the team MVP talk. I'm excited about doing that, by the way. We did them at the end of last year, but this would be cool to kind of give our predictions and see how it plays out for the listener. And for you guys as well, if you guys want to respond to this comment and give your team MVP predictions for the season, I think that'd be interesting to follow along with. One last thing, I talked to Mike Miller about some of the rule changes and then about going against Ryan Osborne in practice. And I'll start with the Osborne portion. His quote was really interesting. Mike Miller said, "We've been working together, and that's been huge," talking about him and Oz. "We talked about it all summer. Why would we not pick each other's brains? And this is interesting. Last year, it was so much of a war going at each other, which, I mean, you could see that. And it was just, I mean, we saw that in the team room after a loss, as all three of them sat on the stage. It was like Osborne wasn't looking up, Miller, I mean, it was a tough dynamic, but you have seen that grow. And like talking to them both individually through the spring and the summer, it does seem like that relationship is improving. I think that'll show on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of brings me to the Panthers too, with like Dave Canales and Ajiro, the Panthers defensive coordinator, where we always think about, oh, these guys are going 7-on-7. These guys are doing one-on-one drills, right? So you might have Dante Balfour guarding, doing a one-on-one drill with a Charlotte wide receiver. But there's also battles with coaches too
Yeah.
in those same practices, right? So it might not just be JC Horn matched up with Deontay Johnson. It's also how can Canales in the 7-on-7 drill beat Ajero? And like you said, how can Mike Miller kind of, beat Osborne on one of these plays? But at the same time, you have to remember that you are a part of one team. That's why the fights that break out at Panthers practice or Charlotte practice, sometimes it's always like, guys, remember the ultimate goal here is that you guys are supposed to be working together in order to get W's on Saturday or Sunday. And like you said, I think that that relationship has grown more than how it was last season.
Yeah. And going from, can the defense basically win the game for the offense? I mean, we saw that last year. Navy, Jeremy, we watched it in the stands at ECU or in the press box at ECU. It's like they might not win the game if the defense doesn't score. And that's improving on that this year. I think the offense is much more competent and they're winning games at practice. And that's a question we'll get into in the fan mail later. But I guess let's go ahead and get into it, guys. Team MVPs. I think this will be really interesting. Hannah, we'll start with you. Who was your offensive team MVP for the season?
Hmm. I feel like I've talked about him before. I want to go Henry Rutledge. I
For
really,
offense? Okay.
yeah, I really think that he is going to have a breakout season. I just really do. I feel like he is somebody that might not be necessarily on a lot of people's radar. Um, and I think he has like a little chip on his shoulder, a little something to prove. I mean, a redshirt junior, so he still has time to grow, but I've liked what I've seen from him. I mean, obviously, we could all sit here and say our offensive MVP would be Max Brown because we haven't really seen anything yet, and we're all excited. Um, but I'm really excited about Henley Rutledge. I'm excited. I think he'll do good.
How about you, Jay?
Yeah, Hannah just kind of dissed me. She said people all want to talk about Max Brown.
No,
I'm
no, no, no.
people. I'm people.
Yeah,
No, it's
no.
I
fine.
mean,
I'm
so am
people.
I. So am I. So am I.
No, no worries. But I mean, please go watch that Chris Reynolds film
Huge.
session where we kind of broke all that down. It was great to see Chris pick Max's brain, or not pick his brain, but kind of show us on a technical level what was happening there. And it's got to be Max. It's got to. If you're trying to win games, if you're trying to be where you want to be, the offensive MVP, it's got to be your quarterback. Same thing with Caleb Williams. Same thing with these other quarterbacks. Malik Neighbors might be great. Marvin Harrison Jr.
Daniel
might be
Jones
great.
is throwing
Daniel,
Toby some
right?
trouble.
But it goes back to the quarterback. Can the quarterback get in the ball? So I'm gonna go with Max Brown on that one. Safe pick. I know it's not sexy, but that's what I'm going with.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I'm gonna pick Max as well, and I'll pick Max as MVP while we have it. And I'm going with Mitchell Mays, the probably playing right tackle, Clemson transfer. I think he's gonna have a monster year, and he's got to because I don't know if you guys have played NCAA 25 with this offensive line, but you have no time. So let's hope that the real life Charlotte 49ers O line is better than the game, and I think Mitchell Mays is going to be a mainstay in that group. Moving to defense, Hannah, who you got for defensive MVP?
Mm.
See, now you
She's
can,
thinking, guys. You can't see her, but
yeah,
her hands over her mouth for people listening on Spotify.
I am really thinking Prince.
yeah,
Mm.
I think since the absence of Demetrius Knight, like Knight had a breakout season last year, I think Prince was kind of in a shadow a little bit. And I feel like, I mean, he's a vet on this team. So I really feel like he is gonna step up to the plate and be that guy for Osborne's right-hand guy. So I have high hopes for him this season. I'd like to see him have a breakout season.
This is the problem with the off season, where like you guys listen to these pods and you hear us say the same thing over and over again. Because I'm gonna say Dante Balfour.
yeah,
Like these aren't
Yeah,
these
which is
aren't
a
sexy
great pick.
picks. Like these are safe picks, but also Coach Osborne came on here and talked to us about Dante's impact, how he can trust the entire left side of the secondary because Dante's over there. Dante said, "Hey, when you play with me on College Football 25, don't worry about the left side, right? I'll do everything else." But also, Osborne mentioned how they picked up three safeties, and they
yep,
wanted those three safeties kind of like Moneyball to it would be great to have one safety that can do everything you want, but you can also get three that can still do each, that can all be great at one thing, and can, as a combination, as a package, can still give you that. Well, you have that guy in Dante Balfour as one of the corners, someone who doesn't need to be switched out on one play for another play. He'll be in for most of the downs on defense. I'm going with Dante Balfour for my defensive MVP.
definitely. I think that probably is the safest pick if we're talking like odds. Definitely Dante's first team All
I'm a
AAC.
betting man, Hunter. You know me.
Yeah, no facts. Thank you, FanDuel, for these kicks. Um, I'm gonna go with Stone Handy, and came on record on here and said I didn't think he was doing as much as I expected him to do at practice. And I got to talk to him at media day, and I asked him what was the deal last year because he's been at two Power Five schools before he came to Charlotte. He committed to Charlotte under Will Healy, was ineligible because that was his second transfer after the one-time transfer rule took effect. He played his first real season with Charlotte under Biff Poggi last year, and he was kind of that opposite reliable option across from Yabi Oki. He started 6 games the last 6 of the year. He really came on at that point. He told me he was playing at 220 pounds, which, as I'm saying here, that's crazy to me. I'm 205 pounds, and if I was playing DN, I'm getting thrown like immediately to the sideline. So that's wild to me. He said he's put on 32 pounds this offseason. Say he's 252 pounds. He feels like he can fight off blocks a lot better. He said last year he dealt with some troubles getting grabbed by tackles and tight ends and whatnot and not being able to get off. He said him and Oz have worked a ton as far as understanding the other aspects of the game too, not just pass rush, which is kind of the main staple in his game. He said he's improved a lot as a run defender, and he's even dropped into coverage a little bit, which I think will be interesting to see in this defense because we saw Marquise Watts do that some at Charlotte. Alex Highsmith even did that a little bit. It's interesting stunts, and I'll be curious who steps up on the other side of the D line because dropping your best pass rusher into coverage never makes any sense to me. That's besides the point, though. I'm going with Stone Handy. I asked him straight up, can you wreck games this year? He said, of course I can, and I can't wait to prove it. Give me Stone. That's my defensive MVP for Charlotte. Let's move to special teams. Hannah, who you got?
Let's give the kickers some love. I think Kyle Cunanan
Okay.
it's be
Love it. Love it.
the MVP. I mean, with the loss of Gonya, I mean,
Yeah, and I go all right, real fast. Gagne is one of the three most important losses from last year's team.
yeah,
Yeah. Or
absolutely.
Demetrius Knight, Nakai Hill Green, Grant Gagne. I don't think it's close. All right, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, so I'm excited. I mean, he's a sophomore, so he's got something to prove. I'm excited. I think he'll be really good. And we never really talk about special teams. So, Kyle, we're all rooting for you. Jeremy, what you got?
Henry.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna go with Henry.
I should
We'll
have saved him for special teams.
no, we're good. Yeah, I guess there's not much to be said, right? We've seen Henry in that spot before. We know he can be productive, and he's got a lot of records. So I'm gonna go with the safe pick 3 times in a row. Sorry, it's not the greatest for the listeners, but when the season comes, the takes will be flying. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Jeremy, I'm copying you. Hannah, you I had no idea he had the longest punt return in school history. It's also crazy that the longest punt return in school history is 46 yards, so that just doesn't
That is
seem very long. But yeah, give me Henry. He's put on some weight. Hannah talked about that too. Definitely added to his frame, and he's making people miss like crazy. So give me Henry. So we've got Hannah's three: offensive MVP Henry Rutledge, defensive Prince Bima, special teams Kyle Cunanan, Jeremy's QB Max Brown, Donnie Balfour, then Henry Rutledge, then myself, Max Brown, Stone Handy, Henry Rutledge. So yeah, takes aren't necessarily flying. Hannah definitely has the most diverse. So good on you, Hannah. And
thanks.
you're right about Prince though. He really has to be really
Yes.
good for this defense to be what they want to be. So I couldn't agree more. And with that, let's dive into a little bit of week one talk. James Madison's coming to town, guys. It's 10 days away. This is a really interesting matchup for Charlotte going against a team that went 11-2 last year, first season in the FBS. They won their bowl game, had a huge season, and they're coming to Charlotte. But they look completely different. That's the biggest thing here. Their head coach is gone, most of their staff, a lot of their players, their quarterback. They are interesting, though, bringing in Bob Chesney from Holy Cross, Dean Kennedy, their offensive coordinator, familiar foe of Ryan Osborne. Jeremy will dive into that in a little bit. But yeah, Jay, let's hear some of your thoughts because I'm interested to see about this team.
Dude, I hit you up, Hunter. I was like, what do you want me to kind of deep dive on? You told me look into JMU's roster a little bit, and I felt like I was a like trying to get a scoop on TMZ for how much stuff was going on with JMU and Indiana. So let's just hop right into it. JMU, they're in the Sun Belt Conference. They went 11-2 last season, counting their bowl game. And their quarterback of last season, 2023, Jordan McLeod, has transferred to the Texas State Bobcats. He led the team in passing yards, 3,657 yards, 35 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, QBR of 70.5. That was 33rd in the entire nation,
Baller.
right? Then I started, dipping in, deep diving a little bit, and I realized I'm on ESPN and I'm clicking on all these players, and all of the things are going from JMU to Indiana. And I'm like, okay, let's just see if this is a one-time thing. Nope, next guy, JMU to Indiana. Oh, wait, defensive players too, JMU to Indiana. So I got to type in what is going on with the JMU and Indiana stuff. And first thing that pops up is, like Hunter said, JMU's coach of last year. And I got this article from Daniel Flick of the Indiana Daily Student, student-led journalism for Indiana. So shout out to them. 2023 head coach Kurt Signetti. I'm not Italian. I don't know how to pronounce that. Is that right?
You
Signetti?
got
Yeah,
it.
Signetti. He
Give me my money.
yeah, right.
Give me
So
that money.
he went to Indiana from JMU, and 9 players joined him. Actually 10 this after this article was done, but high profile players, not just like, oh, we got the third string running back who wants to progress with this head coach. No, these are the people who led the team in passing or led the team in rushing, led the team in total tackles. They all migrated to Indiana. So on Christmas Eve, everyone left. The Hoosiers announced the signing of offensive lineman Nick Kidwell and Tyler Stevens. This is all on Christmas Eve, by the way. Tight end Zach Horton, who led the tight ends in yards and receptions. Running back Kalon Black led the team in rushing. Tyson Lawton was second in rushing. He's a senior, also went to Indiana. Defensive lineman James Carpenter, and then linebackers Aiden Fisher and Jalen Walker, which are 3 of the top 5 players that led the team in total tackles. So he's not just getting players to go from JMU to Indiana who were young. These guys are experienced vets who are high profile, big production players, and they left. So then you think, naturally, who's there to replace them, right? Like Hunter said, 2024 coach Bob Chesney. He comes in, and JMU has high expectations, guys. They finished with at least a 500 record in 21 straight seasons, and they won. Well, they have a winning record in the last 10 seasons. So this isn't one of those projects where Bob Chesney has a big plan, a long, drawn out timeline. The fan base is used to winning, and they don't want that to stop at all, right? With that comes the most important position, the quarterback. Dylan Morris transfers from Washington to JMU. He had a lot of potential and started 11 of 12 games in 2021 until a man named Michael Penix Jr. walked through those doors. And
Yep.
when that happened, took the back seat in 22 and 23, but he's known for his accuracy, his arm strength, and he's not a dual threat guy. I looked back at his stats in 2021, which was the season that he started 11 of 12 games, like I said. He had 11 games, 46 carries, minus 25 yards. And I get it, how,
Sacks are included.
exactly, sacks are included. It's a very misleading sack or stat, but kind of like plus minus in the NBA. If you have a minus 17, you aren't doing something right, even though your team just might not have been good enough. Something wasn't right there. So Dylan Morris seems like the more pro style quarterback, sit back in the pocket, analyze, go through progressions, make passes. You're not really getting that, oh, if he gets out the pocket, now we gotta be in scramble mode. So I'm interested to see what Osborne will kind of draw up, because on the last pod we had him on, he talked about his film study and how deep it goes for him, right? Where he was talking about a Georgia QB, I can't remember his name exactly. He would wipe his towel before he snapped the ball, right?
Yeah.
This is how deep Coach Osborne is getting. So if you give him this much time to prep for a team like JMU, I'm just thinking like, oh man, he's gonna come out with all these new ideas, guns a blazing. So I'm interested to see what Charlotte will do on defense against JMU. What do you guys think?
Well, that's real fast. That's the chess match. You mentioned Osborne. JMU's offensive coordinator is Dean Kennedy, who, if I remember correctly, came with Chesney from Holy Cross, but he spent time at Florida in 2019. Guess who was on Florida staff in 2019? Ryan Osborne. These two are
EMZ
familiar.
article, man. This
I
is like
know.
That's crazy.
crazy.
This game is going to be jumping. I went on a JMU pod the other day. It was very well ran. Shout out to them, JMU Sports News. This game is going to be jumping. Like, it's a huge game for both teams. Charlotte is an 8.5 point dog right now. And when you're looking at Charlotte's schedule, the first 6 or 7 games, this almost shapes up to be a must win in the opener, because you going to North Carolina in week 2, you have Gardner Webb, your FCS team. Then you're going to Indiana, who, as we talked about, is basically JMU 2.0 from last year. Albeit they went 3-9 last year in the Big Ten. Now they have Kurt Signetti. They have all these different high production players in I guess, a bigger conference. That's going to be a tough game. So this game shapes up to be huge for Charlotte. And one interesting thing, one stat that I remember just looking at JMU from last season, they went 10-0 in games and they rushed for 100 yards or more. You mentioned 2 of their top backs transferring. They have a new running back coming in from North Texas. I don't have his name right in front of me. He was 1,000-yard back last year. So they have reinforcements on the way in that front. I'm interested to see about the quarterback position. You talk about him not being a dual threat. I think that plays to Charlotte's favor as far as Stone Handy, guys like Damon Clowney off the edge, and being able to use Prince in the middle of the field rather than having to spy. So yeah, I think this chess match is going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait for week one. I know Biff Poggi and these guys are fired up about it as well. Hannah, any thoughts?
I think it's going to be really exciting. I mean, not only is it the first game at home, first game for the season, I'm also really curious. This is like completely out of the blue, like how well they travel
Yeah.
to the JMU fans, because all I see online is like they're committed, they're hardcore. I mean, like after last season, they were bowl bound for the first time in history. So carrying that success over into this season, I feel like they're going to be hungry. But Charlotte is also hungry because they have a lot to prove. You know what I mean? So I feel like it's definitely going to be a battle. And I'm excited. I'm excited for it. I can't believe that football is finally back. But we also asked you guys some questions on Twitter. So let's get into that right now. So 49 Shades of Green asked, has the offense been able to win any of the days at practice so far? I know that was an early sign of our woes last season.
I'll take that one. I would say yes. I think that they have been way better than last year. Like last year was brutal, guys. Like, I mean, you're out there watching the front four kill them almost every rep. And we've talked about what it's like putting together a makeshift offensive line through the portal. I'm not saying that this year's group is going to be worlds different. They still have a lot to prove because it is another portal created offensive line, but they have made a lot of progression. I think John Marukian going from coaching tight ends to coaching the O line has been huge for them and just creating some continuity because Johnny King is the only returning starter. I think there's 3 or 4 offensive linemen back from last year. Everyone else is new. And you think, how do you get everyone? Jeremy talked about how do you get all 5 of those guys on a string and to be able to, when one goes down, because offensive line is far and away the most physical spot on the field, when one goes down, who's coming in and how does that group reslot? So, yes, the offense is winning days this year. Max Brown has been a star of practice. He's been getting different receivers involved, the tight ends involved, and the running game has taken a way bigger step from where it was at this point last year.
Speaking of the receivers, CLT fan asked, appears to be good depth at receivers at wide receiver, and especially DBs. Who are the likely starters at each position, and how many do you see getting rotated in?
Definitely. So, receiver, I would say if you're looking for a starting 3, it's Jairus Mack, Sean Brown, Omega Blake, and then Therese Trainer has been playing quite a bit. There's a couple more that you see in rotation, but I would bet on at least 3 of those being in the starting lineup because they do like to run some 2 tight end looks. They like to have Joey Burns out there who can either function as a tight end or a fullback. So there isn't really like a spread 4 wide out look very consistently. And then on the defensive side of the ball, we talked a ton about Donnie Balfour. Elijah Culp has taken big strides as far as being that opposite corner. Then you've got Jaquarius Conley coming from North Carolina, and then Ali, who returned from last year's team. He only played in like 6 games, I believe, but he's had pretty good summer and he's gotten some really high preseason accolades, which I thought was interesting. So we'll see what he can bring to the table this year.
Nathan, 49er Nathan asked, which group seems stronger, tight ends or wide receivers? And then has Deshaun Purdy been limiting his interceptions in practice?
Yeah. I guess we'll start with the first one, tight ends or receivers. Colin Weber told me, and this was on the pod, that they had the strongest group of tight ends in the country. And when he said it, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of chuckled because I'm like, there are a lot of really good tight ends across college football. But when you look at that group, the continuity, they are the only group that is the same on this offense. They're bringing back Gus McGee. They're bringing back Bryce Cannon. They're bringing back Colin, who we mentioned earlier. There's a couple more in there that played sparingly last year. Joey Burns, if you want to include him. They really do a lot of unique things, and they bring you the same thing every day. I'm not going to tell you guys that they're the best group in the country, but I definitely think that they're better than the receivers at this moment as far as a deep room that is going to be consistent every day. And then as far as Deshaun Purdy, guys, he's a freshman.
Exactly.
He's still working through what we saw a lot last year from Jalen Jones and Trexler is whoever that primary receiver is, he's focused on them at first. He's looking down his target. That stuff takes time. Like this is one of the youngest players on the team. Spring of last year, he was still supposed to be a senior in high school. So he's progressing and he is getting a lot better. Go ahead, Jay.
On the Deshaun Purdy front, it kind of reminds me of when Bill Belichick would go up against rookie QBs, and it's like just bet on the Patriots to win that game or the rookie QB to throw an interception because you have an offensive mind or a defensive mind like Belichick going up against some guy who's, just got put into the NFL. And it's the same thing with Coach Osborne too. When let's say he's, kind of scheming up a defense for a rookie QB, he's like, you know what? Let me pick on this guy now so that he can get these lumps. You can make the mistakes now while we have a QB like Max Brown. You're able to make these mistakes now, and then maybe down the road, we're going to need you to not make them. But if there's any time to make those, I can't think of a better time than right now.
Yeah,
And
especially in practice.
Yeah.
and one thing really fast after practice the other day, he was getting like extra work throwing flat-footed passes, 60 yards, starting from the front of the end zone to the opposite 40. So I asked him, how far can you throw the ball flat footed? He said about 60, 65. So, okay, how about like a 3-step drop, like a hitch in the drop back? He said 85 yards. That's insane. He's got a hell of an arm. How his game progresses is going to be A, on Mike Miller, B, on him to continue to put that work in. But I think that boy has a ton of talent and he could be really good for Charlotte in the future.
Sorry to be a dead horse, and C, in the offensive line given time to do a 3-step drop and send one in the air that deep.
Bingo.
Big one. All right, next question.
Blake Trantham asked, have there been any serious injuries sustained during camp? I know Biff said he would revalue how he practiced / strength and conditioning after all of the injuries last year. And then he also asked, I noticed Jonathan Wallace and Bushra aren't on the roster anymore. Any idea why they aren't listed?
As far as the injuries, I have not seen anyone major take like a serious dive or be held out of practice. Des Morgan has went down a couple days in a row, bounced back. He's been back on the field. And then Texas A&M transfer Jordan Moko went down, dealt with a knee injury. He's been back in the starting lineup. So I think it's a lot more smaller issues, and they're not hitting nearly as much. It's a lot of thud, which is just basically wrap up and they blow the whistle really early, which pisses a lot of the players off because really the only live group is the O and D lines because you can't get away with not being live there. But I mean, if it's a safety in the middle of the field and it's a running back running at him, they're blowing the whistle like as soon as he gets there. So sometimes it's hard to know, can this running back make that guy miss, or could this DB make that tackle? So it's been interesting, like trying to figure out who is actually really, really good on the defense as far as that goes.
And of course, you never want to, have injuries in practice and stuff. But when week one comes, there's no like preseason for college. You
No,
just come in and the games matter immediately. Do you want that first quarter of the JMU game to be you not only acclimating to the new season and the environment, but also the physicality? If you're not, just having that in practice, maybe what do you think about that, Hunter?
no, for sure. Like they've done 2 scrimmages so far. So they did one Saturday under the lights. I was not able to be there. Um, and uh, they didn't play anyone in that scrimmage. Max Brown played little to none, as far as what I've been told. That was a developmental scrimmage where they hit a little bit more for some of these younger guys who they don't expect to play. But in the first scrimmage, it was laid out in specific teams. First team got a drive, second team got a drive, third team got a drive. Then it flipped. You saw mixing and matching in those teams, which I think is obviously good. You want different O-line groups with the first team because of exactly what I talked about. That group is live every single play. You expect injuries in that group. Physicality is definitely down in my opinion, but at some point they have to turn it up, right? Like the quarterback has to take that hit. And I'll be interested to see, like, we talked, and Chris Reynolds, again, I can't say this enough. Go watch the breakdown on YouTube with Chris Reynolds of Max Brown. You see him take hit after hit after hit and keep getting up. I think that's huge for Charlotte this year because especially in that Florida State game alone, like he was literally sacked 6 times. Like you hope and pray that doesn't happen with this Charlotte offensive line against the opponents that they play. But they have a mock game on the 24th, which is this Saturday, and they'll work a lot of situational stuff. I think we'll get to see a little bit of live stuff there. That would make sense to me. That's your de facto preseason game. Give it a run, put your team in interesting situations, backed up against the goal line, having the other team backed up against the goal line, 3rd and long, 4th and long, Hail Mary, stuff like that. I think this is a good chance for them to get that work in where it actually matters before Saturday, August 31st comes and that place is jumping.
Yeah. And then last question from Andrew Tendler. How has the pass rush looked and who has stepped up outside of Handy?
Good question. I want to bounce back really fast because I didn't address the Big Wall and Bushra. I don't have specific reasons why they're not with the program. They're not at practice, so I don't believe they're with the team. They're not listed on the roster. Um, I'll get some information on that and come back to you guys with that. I'm shocked about Big Wall, though. I mean, he was a huge factor in the docu-series that they did last year, following his story. And I mean, he had a solid season, played a lot of reps for them last year. So I'll get back to you guys on that. As far as the pass rush, there's a lot of names that I think that are going to play. And talking to Ryan Osborne, it's whereas last year there were so many injuries that they had offensive linemen playing defense. I think that this group has so many options that now he's trying to figure out how to play him and win. What are their strengths? Is this guy really good in 3rd and long? We can pin his ears back and get to the quarterback. That sounds like Stone Handy. That sounds like Steven Sings from Miami. That sounds quite a few different players. But as far as people who are really stepping up, I look at Donovan Spellman. He's been making a lot of plays. That's who I think could take that next step on the D line. There's really so many different ones. One interesting one too is Lakota Dupree switching from tight end to defensive end. That's a interesting flip for me, and he's been making a lot of plays at practice. But it's got to be Stone Handy on. He's got to lock that side down. Whoever is going to step up, I think it's going to be quite a few different players. But Damon Clowney is another one too. I feel like we saw what he could do in spurts last year, especially in that Florida game. He was like borderline elite in that game, and he has to be like that for this group because pass rush is going to make or break this team in my mind. All right, guys, appreciate y'all submitting your questions. We definitely want to get fans involved, Q&A, stuff like that. I think it's really good for the show. And definitely keep submitting those. Check out our YouTube at Highway 49 Podcast, and we'll continue to post there. We've got some special content coming for you guys soon. So appreciate y'all tuning in, and we'll be back with more.